Every day, I see people on Reddit completely losing their minds over this new GPT Images 2.0 model. The images look better, the text is finally pretty stable, and of course the internet is doing what it always does, screaming that Photoshop is dead again. But I didn't want to test it like a toy for making next-generation meme pictures. I wanted to test something much more specific. If you ask, can it generate a thumbnail? Of course it can. The real question is what happens after that? Can it survive a real YouTube thumbnail workflow? What happens when you need your face, readable text, a product, a background, a certain style, and then a lot of corrections? That's where the real test starts. So in this video, I'm going to show where it worked, where it started falling apart, what I would avoid, and how I would actually use it if I needed thumbnails without learning Photoshop or paying for another subscription. And by the end, I'll try to make the thumbnail for this exact video in a few different ways, so you can tell me which version you would actually click. One thing that feels different now is that you don't always need to write some perfect robotic prompt. Modern models are getting good enough at understanding messy human input. You can just talk like a normal person. You can be walking, lying in bed, doing your stuff, even taking a shit, and still throw an idea into the model with your voice. But you still need to check what it heard. If it misunderstands one word, you can waste a generation on the wrong thing. So yes, voice input is a really nice feature, just don't switch your brain off completely. The first thing I notice is that if you give it a short request like make me a YouTube thumbnail for this video, the result is usually not what you want. It often gives you that overloaded AI look. Maybe it catches attention for half a second, but it also looks like something from a fully automated content farm. And if you care about your channel and how people see you, that's probably not the look you want. So the first real rule is simple. Don't let the model decide everything for you. The second thing is complexity. The more complex the scene gets, the faster it starts to fall apart. Electronics, tools, professional equipment, products, basically anything with many small details and precise shapes can be dangerous. From far away, it can look okay. But when you look closer, the lines get weird, the details get messy, and the object feels fake. And it's not only about objects, it's also about light. Very dark, low-key scenes, heavy shadows, gradients, and complex lighting can look cool, but they are harder to control and can start falling apart during generation. So here's another boring but important rule. Simple works, complexity melts. In my test with short thumbnail phrases, I didn't really notice spelling mistakes. It works surprisingly well. The problem is usually not spelling anymore. The problem is control. And this is where GPT Images still feels painful. It often puts text too close to the edges or makes it too big. And if you ask it to move the text a little bit, that sounds easy, but inside a generator, it's not easy at all. In Photoshop, you just drag it. Here, you describe it with words. Wait for a new generation, and maybe it barely moves. You ask for a little extra glow and suddenly it becomes too bright. You think you're just moving text a little, or adding an outline, but every correction costs another generation and more of your time. A few words about fonts. You can ask for a certain font. If the font is popular, it can get pretty close, but you should not expect exact typography. It won't give you the actual font like a real editor would. One cool thing though is that you can stylize text almost however you want just by using your imagination. But if you ask for decorative letters, tiny repeated patterns, blocky structures, or complicated textures, the lines start breaking. It may still pass at a tiny size, but the quality is not really there. So my opinion on text is simple. Use GPT to explore text ideas or a rough layout, but for final text I would rather add it in an editor. There is one useful workaround though. If you need a more complex text element, 3D title, a font with volume and texture, or some graphic label, you can generate that separately as a PNG with a transparent background, then place it yourself in an editor. Sometimes it messes this up and gives you fake transparency, those checkerboard squares. If that happens, just ask again and be very specific. It's not perfect, but it works. Working with my face was one of the most interesting parts. For this test, I took very simple selfies near a light wall just using window light. You can also use screenshots from your video, especially if you already talk to camera. And honestly, GPT Images can do a lot with that. It can replace the background pretty well. It can make the light more interesting and make the whole thing feel more like a thumbnail. And then you can start doing the fun, stupid stuff. Want different clothes, a new hairstyle, want to look skinnier, more muscular, become some kind of character, or even turn yourself into a woman. This part is pretty cool because it works better than you expect. The face usually stays recognizable. It keeps the main facial features, the hair, the eyebrows, the general face shape, and even some smaller details like moles or wrinkles. If you zoom in, you can definitely see problems. The eyes can feel slightly off, the skin can look a bit like a render, and the sharpness is not always there. You can tell it's not really a photo anymore. But in a small YouTube thumbnail, it can still be good enough. And this is where the tool really raises the floor. Even a boring selfie can become a decent thumbnail base, especially for someone who has no studio light, no design skills, and no real understanding of what to do. I also tested 2 faces in one frame, things like podcast covers, interview thumbnails, or before and after concepts. With a simple background and a clean composition, it works surprisingly well. Yes, the faces can still have tiny artifacts and the skin texture can look a bit weird, but at thumbnail size, it can be very convincing. Changing emotion too much is risky. If you ask it to make you smile, look shocked, angry, or confused, it can do it. But the further it moves from the original expression, the less it feels like you. Even a simple smile can change too much. The teeth change, the mouth shape changes, the eyes change, and suddenly it's not really you anymore. It's like your brother from an AI mother, so if the emotion really matters, shoot the emotion you need. The same goes for pose and framing. If you want a full body shot, don't give it only a close-up selfie and expect miracles. The head gets too big, the body starts feeling wrong, and trying to fix that with prompts is painful. The closer your source photo is to the final result, the better. It's basically the same principle as compositing. A lot of people make product reviews, tutorials, or videos about tools and gear, and very often you need one simple thing: you holding a product on a decent background looking like an actual thumbnail. And honestly, it can work pretty well, especially when you give it good references. A face reference, a product reference, maybe a logo, and maybe a background or lighting reference. The model can combine all of that into one scene better than I expected. But the same rule comes back again. Simple products work better. Complex shapes, too much tiny text on labels, technical lines, and complicated textures will definitely run you into problems. One thing became very clear. References work much better than prompt only. If you only describe an object, the model invents its own version. If you give it a reference, it has something to follow. And if you already have a channel style, this gets even more interesting. Maybe your thumbnails usually have a specific background, a certain font, layout, or overall design. You can give those references to GPT and say, this is how my thumbnails look, this is the mood, try to match it. And it can actually follow that pretty well. But there is a difference between using references and stealing. Some AI tools literally advertise features like paste a YouTube link and copy the thumbnail. I would not recommend that. Studying what works is normal, but cloning someone's thumbnail one-to-one is not inspiration, it's lazy theft. This might be the most important workflow lesson. You change a lot of stuff, add text, add elements, adjust the background, maybe change the lighting, and after just a few requests, everything starts looking a little strange. The textures get weird, the sharpness gets worse, and you start feeling that something is just off. If you've tried generating images in GPT with many edits, you probably know exactly what I mean. So I would not treat repeated edits as final production. I would treat them as concept development. Use iterations to find the idea, the composition, the light, and mood. But once you know what you want, stop torturing the same image. You can ask it to rebuild the image from scratch in the same chat, or you can ask it to write a clean final prompt first. I would recommend doing this in thinking mode. That second option is usually better for control, because then you can see how the model understood your messy direction. You can read the prompt, remove extra stuff, fix details, simplify the scene, add or change what you need, and only then generate the final image. So the rebuild is not only about quality, it is also about getting control back. Yes, the clean rebuild can look different, and sometimes the first clean version is not as cool as the messy one you had before, so you generate a few variations and choose the best one. I think it helps to understand why this happens, at least in simple terms. GPT Image doesn't work like Photoshop. It's not taking your image and moving one clean layer, changing one slider, or replacing one object in a perfectly controlled way. A very simplified way to think about diffusion-style models is this: they learn how to build an image from noise, guided by text and visual information. Every time you ask for something new, or even just ask for a small fix, the whole image gets regenerated in some way. The model tries to keep what was already there, but it also has to reinterpret the image again. It's kind of like the telephone game. The first version says one thing, then the next version tries to repeat it but changes a few details. Then the next one repeats that version and changes a few more. And that explains a lot of the technical problems that start showing up during iterations, especially that weird AI haze and the consistency drift. After testing realism, faces, products, text, and all those annoying little details, the place where AI felt most interesting to me was stylization. When you try to make something look like a real photo, your brain has a lot of ways to reject it. So when something is almost real but not quite real, you feel it. That's very close to the uncanny valley problem. But when you move into stylization, fantasy, or visual metaphor, you're no longer asking the viewer to believe this is a real photo. You're creating an image with its own rules. In those cases, the viewer's brain becomes much more forgiving because it's not comparing every little detail to reality. And this is where GPT Images 2 can be genuinely powerful. Before, these kinds of images required illustration and design skills, compositing, rendering, or just a lot of time. Now you can really unleash your creativity and try those ideas in minutes. But the same rule still applies. A creative mess is still a mess. You still need focus, a clear idea, and thumbnail thinking. So for the final test, I tried to make the actual thumbnail for this video in a few different ways. First, I did the lazy version, just a short prompt based on the title and the idea, and honestly, it gave me exactly what I expected, a generic, overloaded AI thumbnail. Then I tried a more directed version with a better prompt and my photo, and that was already much more usable. The face was not perfect, and if you look closely, you could still tell it was generated. But at thumbnail size, it was already in the range where I think some people could absolutely use it. After that, I used a selfie, I used frames from my actual video, and I tried to match the thumbnail more closely to the style of my channel and the mood of the video itself. I generated the base image first, then I generated the failed stamp on a transparent background and assembled everything in Photoshop, where I could move things around and fix things in a normal way. And that worked much better. Maybe this thumbnail is a little simple and boring, but it's clear. It communicates the idea and keeps my face in the thumbnail. Then I edited the thumbnail into this glitch version, just using Photoshop, and honestly, I liked it more. At the same time, I understand why some people might skip that thumbnail. It's dirtier, riskier, and not everyone will read it as ugly on purpose. And in the end, I made a few variations by hand, using GPT only to generate some of the elements. So tell me in the comments, which version would you actually click? If you use it like a magic one-click thumbnail machine, it becomes unstable, generic, and kind of annoying. But if you treat it as part of a controlled workflow, it starts making much more sense. If you are a beginner, this can be a real use case. Sometimes you don't need a masterpiece. You just need something better than a random screenshot from your video or a flat selfie with text on top. For people somewhere in the middle, I think this is where it gets even more interesting. If you know even a little bit of a graphic editor, this tool becomes more like an accelerator. It helps you test ideas, create a base, match a style, generate elements, or try visual concepts that would take too long to build manually. Because even for my simple thumbnail, when I actually tried to make something more controlled, I still spent a lot of time. So if you can get something decent quickly, that already matters. If you're a professional, you already have your process, your taste, your tools, and your tricks. This might help you in some parts of the workflow, but it probably won't replace the whole thing. And it definitely cannot replace Photoshop for people who need maximum control. So yes, GPT Images 2 can make decent thumbnails. But the better question is, can you use it without letting it make every decision for you? If you use it blindly, you get AI slop. But if you control the idea, use references, understand how your prompts work, and learn how to communicate with the model, then it becomes much more than just an image generator. Sure, it's not magic, but also not just a toy anymore.